This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, Australia's nightmarish lockdown. A courageous dissident takes a stand. With us this evening, Morgan Jonas, a brave freedom fighter in Melbourne, Australia, who is the president and host of the MCJ Report. Morgan, what an honor and privilege to have you on the Glazov Gang.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. So Morgan, I don't even know what words to use sometimes, perilous, Kafkaesque, terrifying times, some kind of fascism/communism taking over the world through medical tyranny and other stuff. So we've got it bad enough in Canada, United States, but something going on in Australia that's just even way beyond in some ways. Tell us, okay, before we get to that, tell us a little bit about yourself and what the MCJ Report is about.
Not a problem at all. So I come from an international trade background, but I transitioned because I identified certain issues within our trade policy that I took exception to and transitioned into a different line of work. So today I'm the host of my own independent media show. I've been critical of the government well before the inception of this corona situation, particularly in relation to trade deals. And since the inception of corona and the very quick removal of so many of our freedoms, I've been outspoken against the government, involved in several protests. I've been under the boot of the government now several times, arrested for what I consider to be nothing more than exercising my right to free speech and freedom of movement, and for other people as well. And I run my own independent show 4 nights a week. So that's where I'm at.
Wow. Well, thank you for being such a noble and brave dissident in these very frightening times. Morgan, some of the stuff I'm reading about Australia, correct me if I'm wrong, there's helicopters in the sky making sure somebody doesn't go to the store. We've got the authorities telling people not to talk to each other. What's going on there? Tell us about the state of the lockdown.
Everything you just mentioned plus more. Many people never thought we'd see a state like this in Australia, but since the inception of corona and the implementation of the emergency powers, we've seen a tremendous amount of consolidation of executive power in the government, both at a state and federal level. So what the government describes as taking measures to so-called tackle the pandemic, I would describe as a complete and absolute assault on our most very basic freedoms. So as you correctly pointed out before, yes, helicopters in the sky are a regular occurrence. The police taking measures to try and ensure that people are not in breach of the health orders. We have received official advice from health bureaucrats to, for example, if you see somebody you know down the street at the market, at the shops, do not talk to that person because you may be spreading the virus. We have door patrols, okay? So we have the military and the police knocking on people's doors in Western Sydney. Social distancing, mask mandates outside, gyms are closed. The government is trying to put pressure on young people to wear masks. And of course, we're now witnessing perhaps the greatest medical coercion campaign of all time. And that is, of course, the prospect of mandatory vaccinations for people in order to keep their jobs. And, you know, we're in a lockdown here in Melbourne right now, where I'm from, Melbourne, Victoria. This is our 7th lockdown. And those who say violate the lockdown could very well end up arrested. Often the police are extremely heavy-handed, and we are living in a state of tyranny.
Wow. So Morgan, overall, whatever this COVID thing is that has a survival rate of 99.95% of people, it's being weaponized by fascists and communists with technology now, this is some kind of globalist takeover by very evil forces. What do you think?
All right, sure. So that's a great question. It's a good question. What we know for sure in Australia is that much of the policy which has been implemented and rolled out in the country has come from the World Health Organization. So from policy in relation to COVID testing, lockdowns, the so-called pandemic response, which has raised a lot of questions in itself, which is to what extent are Australian politicians actually conducting their own analysis, asking their own questions, and spearheading their own policy, or are they just adopting policy from these international multilateral institutions such as the World Health Organization? So many people are certainly scratching their heads thinking, well, who's really calling the shots here?
Right, right. Thank you, Morgan. We're going to be back in just a minute. We got to get a word from our sponsors.
Welcome to my art studio where all the magic happens. This is the station for painting, and that is the station for all the resin art I do. If you want to check out my art, all you gotta do is go to lutfstudio.com. While you're there, make sure to use promo code GLAZOV. You will get yourself a wonderful discount, and generous portion of your purchase will be donated to Glazov Gang channel on YouTube. So the one and only wonderful Dr. Jamie Glazov can keep on fighting for our freedom.
And we are back with Morgan Jonas. Morgan, thank you for joining the Glazov Gang. You're describing a real nightmarish lockdown that's going on in Australia. I've been watching and following your work now. You're really keeping an eye on the police and all these acts of violence that they're actually perpetrating against freedom advocates. You've been a victim of this yourself. Describe to us also this suppression of human rights, of free speech, of movement, of expression. The authorities are behaving ruthlessly and fascistically, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Freedom of movement has been completely stripped from us. So it's not uncommon in Australia for the state government to impose a movement restriction such as 5 kilometers. So right now, much of the country are limited in terms of how far they can venture from their homes. Should somebody be a, quote, authorized worker, they may only be able to leave to go to work subject to a PCR test. And now we're seeing the rollout of vaccinations. Those who venture beyond their restricted travel bubble could be subject to interrogation and arrest by the police. And often we've seen arrests can be conducted quite violently. So it's scary times. And of course, we see the suppression of speech campaign. We see the pile-on of members of parliament who do the right thing, that stand up for the people, who make an effort to share information about alternate remedies that just don't happen to be a vaccine. We see them taken off social media, shunned by the mainstream media and pushed to the side. Doctors who have spoken out are ignored by the government and labeled as crazy conspiracy theorists by the mainstream media. And also people like myself, I run my own show. And again, we see the pile-on from the mainstream media trying to cast these labels such as anti-vaxxer, crazy person, this person is spreading misinformation. So it's a true suppression campaign, and it is most definitely authoritarian in nature.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating and horrifying just how they've put everything into place. You know, the media very much also, you know, the tech companies, the media, they're all doing the work of these forces behind the scenes. Just tell us a little bit about how the media, I mean, is there even one voice in the media aside from independent, courageous dissidents like yourself? The media is completely in the pocket of these figures, right? These, I guess, what I would call deep state figures.
Sure. So the mainstream media in Australia overwhelmingly appears to behave and act like state-run media, no different from, say, the Global Times in China, although they are private corporations. So the question must be asked: what exactly is the relationship between the mainstream media and the government? Because overwhelmingly, the mainstream media is not willing to challenge the underlying narrative of COVID, or specifically, are these restrictions being imposed upon us, these mandates and the removal of our rights, are they proportionate to the threat of COVID? Nobody is truly asking that question. There have been some questions raised by some people in the mainstream media, but those people are very few and far between. And in my view, they're not going nearly as far enough. So that's where the independent media comes in. Shows such as myself, MCJ Report, we ask the hard questions, we scrutinize the government, and we challenge them on their decisions. And that's the basis for our show. Because that's a job the mainstream media is not willing to undertake.
And thank you, Morgan. And describe some of the attempts at censorship and persecution that you've experienced. I'm sure that you're feeling the pressure of the forces at hand and the powers that be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've personally experienced shadow banning. I've been blacklisted by one of the mainstream social sites. Many people I know have been taken off social media and banned. One of our members of parliament, a federal member by the name of Craig Kelly, he was removed from Facebook because he was sharing studies on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and Facebook deemed him to be spreading, quote, misinformation. And he is one of the only voices we have in our government speaking up for the people, doing a great job. You know, when you think about Craig Kelly, you think about people like Ron DeSantis in Florida. So the suppression campaign is huge. We've seen doctors as well, people who are well versed in virology, also censored and taken off the internet. It's very extreme.
Morgan, could you just describe a little bit the details of one of your arrests that was perpetrated in a Nazi-like fashion by the authorities? What happened?
Okay, sure. So October, I've been arrested multiple times, campaigning for freedom, standing up for our rights. I guess what stands out the most would have been October last year. We were in a very small group of people in a park. It was a very small demonstration, and this was during a time when the so-called chief health officer directions were in force, and as a result of those directions, many people's rights were suppressed at the time. There was a small group of us. And Jamie, I've got the footage. I can send it to you after the show, so you'll know that I'm not making this up. There were about between 200 to 300 police that showed up, including general duties police, the mounted unit. There was a helicopter in the sky, and also a unit referred to as PORT, Public Order Response, who are a specialized team who specialize specifically in making arrests. So there was a small group of us. The police were sent in. They created a ring around us so nobody could leave. Everybody was arrested. And that day I was arrested by the Public Order Response team, the special team. So everyone else was arrested by general duties, but they sent the Public Order Response team to come and get me, whereupon they got me in a headlock. They twisted my arms backwards. It was an extremely painful experience. I had to go to the hospital later on to get a CT scan and a diagnosis for an eye injury. And that was a turning point in my life. I experienced the boot of the state, and it really motivated me to roll my sleeves up and to get further involved in this tremendous challenge. So I'll send you the footage afterwards.
Thank you. You know, I wonder if that was a pro-Chinese communist demonstration or a pro-Black Lives Matter demonstration, whether they would have treated you like that.
Absolutely not. We had a Black Lives demonstration here in Melbourne, also during a time when the health directions were enforced. The demonstration attracted thousands of people. Not only did Victoria Police stand by and allow it to happen, several officers took a knee, which is something that they should never do, showing a political allegiance in any way, shape, or form. So I can show you the footage from that as well. Just complete double standards demonstrated by our police force.
And did they hand out coffee and donuts too? I don't know. The whole thing is just so absurd. Morgan, we got to go. I want to ask before we leave, look, we each got our own views on this in the sense of we're describing and we know what's happening. Then we've got our own personal views about why it's happening. For me as a Christian, I see a spiritual war here. I see some kind of very evil Luciferian forces at work. I see the book of Revelations a bit. Look, I don't know a lot, but something seems to be happening with some kind of globalist takeover. I suspect these vaccination passports eventually are going to lead to some kind of chip, some kind of scanning thing on a person's body. There's going to be a mass Chinese surveillance system of some kind. Then you're not going to be able to buy or sell without a certain mark, as we're told in Revelations. Something of that matter is happening. The virus is just a little ingredient that they're weaponizing to make this happen. If I were to ask you what's behind all this, could you just share a few of your thoughts of what you think is happening?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I don't want to speculate too much, but I certainly see a tremendous power grab all over the world. A grab for further control over populations all over the world, done so under the false guise of public health. I see a tremendous transfer of wealth from the working middle class population to the big tech giants, and we see the erosion of our freedoms, which I suppose goes hand in hand with the profiteering of those who are capitalizing off this tremendous scandal. So I see a huge power grab, and I would describe it as evil by nature.
Absolutely. Morgan Jonas, what an honor and a privilege it is to have such a brave, noble freedom fighter on our show. We've got a lot of viewers that are very inspired right now, and if they follow you, they're going to obviously find out what's happening in Australia, but also what's happening in Australia is completely interlinked and connected to what's happening all over the world. So you're the person to follow. Tell our viewers where they can follow you and how they can support you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And I just want to say it's a great pleasure for me to be on your show. You're doing a tremendous job. If anyone would like to follow what we're doing, my website is mcjreport.com. Very soon I'll be broadcasting directly to my website. We're seeking to be completely independent of all the mainstream social media outlets. But in the meantime, I am broadcasting live from Facebook 4 nights a week. And my name on Facebook is simply my name, Morgan C. Jonas. But very soon, mcjreport.com will have everything that people need to follow the show and to stay in touch.
Fantastic. Morgan Jonas, thank you for joining us, and may the Lord have a layer of light around you that protects you and also gives you strength, okay?
Thank you, sir. And it's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope to speak again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. We hope to have you back soon. Thank you for joining the Glazov Gang this evening. Morgan Jonas, mcjreport.com. Visit it. We'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I recently got one of Mike Lindell's pillows and comforters at mybillow.com, and I started getting some of the most restful sleeps in my life. And you can do the same. Go to mypillow.com and use code GG21 to get incredible and amazing discounts. Or just call 1-800-854-0673. While you're doing that, you'll know that you're supporting Mike Lindell, a true American hero fighting a true American cause. And you'll also be supporting the Glazov Gang. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless America.